Hello, everyone, and welcome to Reconvene Sessions. We're so happy that you made it out to join us this morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you're viewing from, and we're really excited to hear from some amazing event creators today. My name is Alex Gallinari. I am a brand and community marketing manager here at Eventbrite, and I'm going to be your host today. I'm coming to you live from our headquarters in beautiful San Francisco, California. Eventbrite's Reconvene Sessions is an ongoing event series covering what's new, what's next, and what really matters for event creators. These events are meant to empower creators to share experiences, not only building and hosting events, but also passing along useful strategies for your events and businesses. Really quick, in order to participate in the chat today, you'll need to create a YouTube channel. If you haven't done this already, it's really, really easy. It only takes a few seconds. You just have to follow those prompts on YouTube. For those of you who are already logged in, there are a ton of you. Let's say hello to each other in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from and if there's anything in particular that you're wanting to learn in today's session. I see a ton of folks from the US, DC, Ohio, a bunch from the UK. What's up, London, Pennsylvania, Oakland, Kansas City. We got the whole globe represented. It's awesome to see y'all. All right, I'm very excited about today's session and the topic, growing pains, what to expect when expanding your event. Growing a business is really hard work, obviously, but I want you to know that you're not alone in this effort. We have a community of entrepreneurs here to help you navigate all of the challenges that you may face and also to celebrate the successes with you. And not only do we have 3 expert event creators here to talk you through how they expanded their events and businesses, and to share with you what they learned along the way. But I also know that there's such a wealth of knowledge in this room right now. So I encourage you to make connections throughout today's event. Really quick overview of today's schedule. First up, we'll hear from Corey Williams Schneider, who is the founder of New York Adventure Club. Corey grew his business from a small newsletter to a thriving community of over 50,000 members. And he's going to share with us the processes and the tools that he used and the people that he tapped to make it happen. Then we'll hear from Sasha Jones, who is the CEO of the queer community space Cuties LA. Since taking over the business, Sasha has diversified their programming to reach new and underserved communities, and she's going to explain how you can do the same. And then finally, we'll hear from Precious Green, who is the program director at the San Francisco-based community and learning space, Manny's. Precious is going to talk to us about how she partners with like-minded organizations and spaces to really expand their influence beyond just their physical space. We're really happy to have our speakers in the chat with you today, so feel free to ask them questions during the presentations, and they're going to do their best to jump in and answer you live. And then we're also going to have a live Q&A with all 3 speakers at the end of today's session, so you're going to want to stick around. And now, before we get started, let's make sure that we're set up for success. We're a community of creators who really strive to create community for others through events. So we want to model what community looks like. Let's encourage one another, be curious, and be grounded in the spirit of learning. The chat will be monitored, and harassment of any kind will not be tolerated. There will be a full recording of today's session posted with closed captions after the event on the Eventbrite YouTube channel. And like I said before, please feel free to connect with one another in the chat. We have creators joining from all over the globe, and whether you're looking to build with someone new in your city or your industry, take advantage of the wealth of knowledge in the room. If you're going to share anything from today's session, let's use our hashtag Reconvene so we can connect really easily. And last PSA for me is self-care. Please feel free to take a stretch break, grab a bite to eat. Today's session will be recorded and posted shortly after we wrap, so you're not going to miss a beat. All right, that's it for me. I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Corey Williams Schneider. Corey studied business administration with specializations in marketing and entrepreneurship and innovation, and moved to New York City after school to work at Time Inc., where he held roles in customer acquisition, customer retention, and paid content strategy. After a few years, he felt he wasn't taking advantage of everything that New York had to offer, so he started a Facebook group to try and encourage his friends to explore the city with him. And what started as a group of just 40 people has grown into a company that produces over 20 events per week for a community of over 50,000 members. And here to tell us how he did it is New York Adventure Club's founder, Corey Williams Schneider.
Thank you, Alex, and good afternoon, event creators. Thanks so much for tuning in today to my presentation theme, set up for success, how to scale your business as a small team or sole founder. My name is Corey William Schneider, and I'm the CEO and founder of New York Adventure Club, a New York tours and events business that curates unique experiences geared for locals. We organize everything from behind-the-scenes tours of New York landmarks to virtual lectures on moments in world history. Some of our most popular experiences include a Japanese tea ceremony inside a secret garden, an after-hours vertical exploration of one of the world's largest cathedrals, and a tour through one of the best-preserved Gilded Age mansions in New York. I wanted to thank Eventbrite for the invitation to share some tips on how to scale your events business as a sole proprietor or small team. And by the end of this talk, I hope you walk away with the answers to the following 3 points. How to grow your business without burning out. How to be resourceful at every stage of your business. And how to keep costs under control. If you're watching this presentation, it means that you're probably wondering how I grew New York Adventure Club from a weekly events newsletter and 40-person Facebook group in 2013 to an in-person and virtual events business that has hosted over 5,000 events for a built-in audience of 50,000 people. To help break down some of the most important elements that allowed me and still allow me to manage my growing company as its only full-time employee, I want to introduce an acronym that sums it all up. COMMET. Commitment, organization, mentorship, empower, and technology are the categories that form the backbone of my company's operations. While I'll focus on how they apply to my particular business, they can easily be applied to any business in any industry. Whether you're launching a new monthly event series or starting a new blog, it's crucial that you stay committed to the project's frequency without interruption if you want to preserve a high level of trust in your brand. When I started my company's newsletter, I made sure that it deployed every Thursday at noon, so my audience would always come to expect it. Outside of holiday weekends, I've kept that routine up for over 8 years and will continue doing so as long as I have a newsletter. Or when my company had to pivot to virtual events, I made sure to only schedule them once I could ensure that a customer purchasing a ticket through Eventbrite would have their information passed over to the webinar room in an automated and seamless process. And on a side note, if you're interested in the nuts and bolts behind this pivot to virtual, feel free to watch my 40-minute talk from last year's Eventbrite Reconvene Summit. Of course, things don't always go as planned, but committing yourself to maintaining a high level of consistency will show your audience that you're both professional and dependable. Being organized, in my opinion, ranks as the most important factor in being able to scale efficiently and effectively with a small workforce. Without creating structure for yourself and your company, it'll be almost impossible to avoid falling behind on important tasks and feeling overwhelmed. So how can you stay on top of your priorities each day? The to-do list is one of the most simple yet effective ways to stay on top of your daily and weekly tasks. After creating a template several years ago that fit my company's particular needs, I simply update the document each week and print out a physical version to put on my desk. Since I always have a ton of browser tabs open on my computer at once, this piece of paper helps ensure that I stay on top of my priorities. On top of that, there's something extremely gratifying about physically crossing off tasks as I complete them. This can also be done digitally, of course, so it's important to figure out what works best for you. SOPs, for short, standard operating procedures, are step-by-step documents that help break down and codify exactly how you perform a particular task, so your colleagues can easily replicate the process just how you like it. When I hired a virtual assistant in early 2021 through a freelancer website to focus on operational tasks that were eating up a lot of my time, I created SOPs for every single type of task that I wanted her to work on, from how to create an Eventbrite event page in our standard format to how to handle general customer service inquiries with pre-written responses. Assigning days of the week to specific goals is yet another great way to ensure that the daily influx of emails and calls don't distract you from your overall objectives. I typically assign Mondays as office work days. They include everything from sending invoices and paying bills to handling bookkeeping or accounting matters. Tuesdays are dedicated to rescheduling repeat events. Wednesdays are for event partner outreach surrounding new events, and so on. Nobody can be an expert in everything, so be sure to first seek out the advice of your business-oriented friends and colleagues before launching your next big idea. They'll be able to share their unique perspective or help you think through a challenge. Even if you don't end up incorporating their ideas, hearing them out will reinforce your original approach. Case in point, My same day, same task recommendation from a minute ago was a work hack I picked up when attending a startup workshop led by a professional business coach. One of the greatest sources of business advice that I've received over the years is a program called SCORE, the nation's largest network of volunteer, expert business mentors that's funded in part by the Small Business Administration. It's a free service, let me reiterate, free service that pairs you with experts in a range of fields from accounting to marketing. I personally used it many times throughout my business journey, from speaking to a lawyer on how to incorporate my business to connecting with a professional business consultant on how to scale my virtual events business. Always look to build your team from the inside out by empowering your existing audience who care most about the events you're hosting. Over the past 8 years, I've always turned to the Adventure Club community when in need of recruiting individuals for volunteer or paid opportunities to help the brand. After 2 years of being New York Adventure Club's sole representative at every single event, I decided to create a brand ambassador program to empower other passionate adventurers in our community to have the opportunity to visit incredible destinations around New York. Once I create a short onboarding wiki, that is a web page with a step-by-step outline of how to become a brand ambassador, along with its roles and responsibilities, the first place I turned to recruit ambassadors was my own newsletter. After promoting the program, I received several replies that same day from members who would go on to facilitate countless events, allowing me to focus my time on other priorities. When I pivoted to virtual events back in March of 2020, I had no choice but to personally moderate each webinar. While it started off as one webinar every couple of days, it quickly grew to 3 webinars a day, 5 days a week, which meant that in addition to moderating each webinar, I also had to get all of my other work done. 6 months later, and on the brink of burning out, I created a virtual moderator program with a detailed SOP in hopes of empowering other individuals to facilitate webinars and thus free up several hours a day in my own schedule. After sending a message to our audience through the newsletter, I received a response from several people right away, some of whom still moderate all of these years later. Their responsibilities include everything from checking in with presenters the morning of the event to helping presenters and attendees troubleshoot any technical issues. Technology is typically the most expensive part of any service business's operation, though by using third-party programs that already have the capabilities you're looking for, you can avoid hiring costly programmers to build features from scratch. My first site for many years was built using a website builder, which allowed me to put together a professional website without having to know a thing about programming. Wix and Squarespace are some of the most popular companies, both of which can easily integrate with your Eventbrite account. Only when I was in need of very customized features did I start working with an offshore developer team to build a custom website. While there are countless online products for managing your relationships with clients and vendors, creating a simple spreadsheet is a great way to get started. My workflow for reaching out to new event partners involves listing all of the names in a single column down the sheet and listing the different stages of that relationship along the top row. Until there is a crucial need for fancy software, I'm going to stick with the free option. And whether I need graphic design work done or someone to help out with social media marketing, I always try to leverage technology to outsource cost-effective independent contractors. Some sites I've used before include Upwork, Fiverr, FreeUp, and TopTal, though there are countless others. By following the common approach, I hope you'll discover that creating structure around your workflow will result in more productivity without feeling overworked. And by always questioning every single expense, you'll give your company a better chance of not only surviving, but thriving. On that note, I look forward to our live Q&A at the end of today's presentation. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Corey. That was really incredible. And I really appreciate you truly sharing the nuts and bolts of your operations that allow you to accelerate and manage your business's growth. You opened up with this idea of commitment, and you talked about commitment to your audience. And I just wanted to add that in addition to committing to your fans, we all really need to have that same commitment to ourselves. You know, you've been on a 10-year journey with New York Adventure Club, and I'm sure the destination you're at now wasn't always clear. But the key to entrepreneurship is committing to that journey and not just the destination. You may not know what exactly lies ahead, but you must know that you're going to do whatever it takes to succeed. Really, expanding a business does not happen overnight. And I want to leave you with a quote that I'm totally stealing from Eventbrite CEO Julia Hartz, who says, "She who lasts the longest wins." All right, next up is Sasha Jones. Sasha has a knack for building community where it's needed most. In 2018, Sasha started a job as a part-time barista at Cuties LA, and today she is the CEO and owner. What started as a coffee shop and safe space for the queer community has since grown into a diverse event space that hosts queer family picnics, poetry nights, film screenings, and so much more. She is also the co-organizer of POC Camp, which is a group camping trip for Black and Brown folks to camp together. Please join me in welcoming Sasha Jones.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Eventbrite, for having me today. My name is Sasha. I'm the owner and CEO of Cuties Los Angeles, and I'm excited to share today about diversifying businesses that are rooted in a shared mission. Just to give you a little background on who we are, Cuties is a Black and queer-owned community space. We provide resources and events, both virtually and in person, to the LGBTQIA+ community. We started in 2017 as a coffee shop and community space, and just to have a safe space for queer folks to gather that wasn't centered around alcohol or partying like the typical queer scene in LA. We lost the physical space in 2020 due to COVID-19. And a few months after we closed, the former founder and owner, Virginia, transferred ownership to me, Sasha, and the organization has continued under my guidance. And our goal is the same: to provide resources, joy, and healing to queer, trans, and gender nonconforming folks, with special focus and offerings exclusively for our QT BIPOC family. So today we'll talk about developing authentic, diverse programming, and that it really starts from the ground up. These are some of our events: our sound bath, an event, a workshop that we had on healing touch, and our queer family picnic. We will talk about diversifying your business through people, venue, and partners, and events. So starting off with people, the most important aspect of creating spaces and having our events. When I first began my work with Cuties, I was the only Black person working in the space. I was trained by a Black person and then they left. And it really just didn't feel good to me. It really proved that even though a space can be a queer space, that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a safe space for QT BIPOC or queer and trans, Black, Indigenous people of color. So, if you are in a space and you're wondering, how can I diversify the people in my community? How can I diversify my programming? It really starts with hiring BIPOC or QT BIPOC employees and creating offerings specifically for them. If you are a one-person team, the next person that you hire should not look like you. They should have a different identity than you. It's really, really important to have differing opinions and insights and perspectives that can really give you a well-rounded programming. You build community by seeing the diversity in these spaces. Like you have to have people physically showing up in these spaces. If if you don't have any Black or brown folks around you, depending on where you live, look for local Black, Latinx, AAPI, Indigenous-owned businesses, spaces, organizations, and find ways to connect with them. See what spaces they have and see ways that you can collaborate with them. Really engage with your community. And if you're not able to find anything local, there are ways that you can create offerings online where you can connect and collaborate with people that are different than you, that may not live near you. And when you're having this space or the event, you have to be mindful of the little things. What's the music that's being played? Who are the people that are a part of the event? You have to show and not tell. You have to really show up and let folks know that they are welcome there. Building diversity in your company or event series builds community, and it builds trust, and it lets folks know that they are safe. It takes intentional effort, and we have to be willing to give up spaces for others. And I specifically say this to white folks when wanting to have programming specifically for Black and Brown folks. Don't be afraid to have programming specifically for them. Don't be afraid to give up your space and allow folks to use the space for free to gather. That really creates relationship building and trust in a long-term way. This is from our color party, which we'll talk about later. So next up is venue and partners. And I will say this a lot, but be intentional with everything. Listen to your gut and trust your intuition. That's how I do a lot of my work, and that's how we do a lot of our work, is how does this feel? How does this connection feel? How does this event feel? So you want to source venues and spaces that align with the event. Work with BIPOC partners, find queer-owned businesses that are local to you. For example, we have an event that's called Les Paint that we've done. It's a paint event that we've had in a local pottery studio. So really think about what's available to you in your community, and then maybe brainstorm on what events you could have in that space. Some resources for partners or vendors. I would say Queer 26 is a huge digital resource that's available to anyone, anywhere. They have a large creative directory with photographers, videographers, all sorts of queer and trans BIPOC, I believe, that are available for hire that you can connect with. Also, don't be afraid to ask your community, pull to call out on Instagram, use your newsletter, and really engage with the attendees at your events, get to know your community. One of the folks that we collaborate with now, the Plant Chica, who's shown in this image, it's a greenhouse that's also an event space, and we literally have the same nail tech. Shout out Kristen, plenty of nails. And so I think part of that is, don't be afraid to talk about your work. Don't be afraid to share about it, because you really never know who you're talking to and what connects they might have. And, I was sharing about events, and Kristen was just like, oh, I know this person that owns the space. Y'all should connect. It's really as simple as that. So be willing to really talk to the people that are coming to your events and talk to your communities. You don't know what skills are out there, but people have a lot to offer. Just to shout out some of our fave spaces in LA, there's Reparations Club, which is a Black and queer owned bookstore, the Plant Chica, which I mentioned, Pot LA, which is also a queer BIPOC owned pottery studio, Wood Coffee Co., which is a queer-owned coffee shop in Long Beach, and Sip and Sonder, which is also a Black and queer-owned coffee shop. So, think outside of the box when it comes to venues. Don't just look for an empty studio space. When you're able to collaborate with people in community, it builds more and more community. It allows you to introduce your community to the venue spaces and vice versa. So it's just a really good way to get to know more folks and really collaborate and commune with people. These are a couple more images from our poetry night on the left that also takes place at the Plant Chica, and from our Les Paint event on the right. So talking about events specifically, I would say really create the events that you want to see. That's what you're going to be most excited, most passionate, most energized about, is something that you would want to go to. Oftentimes folks will come to us with an idea and say, oh, you should do this event. And it's well, we may not have the capacity, but you should totally do it, And I think that's where much of our programming has come from. Just oh, this would be a really cool event to go to. And it doesn't look like it's happening. So maybe we can make it happen. And also being open again to collaboration and working with people, and being open to engaging with your community in a way that allows them to feel comfortable to share an idea with you. Our Les Paint event, it's a smoke and paint class for Black lesbians, and that was my employee Tony, our social media and event coordinator, that was her idea because she is a Black lesbian. I don't identify as a lesbian. I would have never thought to have this idea. And so just really being open and having conversation and getting feedback from your community to see what they might be interested in and if it aligns with something that you might want to do too. Our readings at sunset, it's a monthly poetry night, which came from having brunch with a friend who's a poet, So I think it's just really important to figure out what it is that you like, that you would want to see, while also staying open to collaborating with people whose ideals or missions really align with yours. This is from our first poetry night, our first readings at sunset last summer. And the last little bit of advice is to take care of yourself. Burnout is very, very real. And, oftentimes when you're starting a company or starting to throw an event, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But after some time, you realize that you cannot do it on your own. And so I literally had a conversation with my therapist, and she's like, you can't do this alone. You can't serve your community if you're not at 100%. And so that's something that I think organizers and event space makers and event creators should really keep in mind, that we have to feel good so that we can in turn show up for our community. Hire someone as soon as you can, My budget was small. It was for 5 hours a week, but it made a huge difference. And a year later, we're still working together. And now, I ask for volunteers. People are always so happy to volunteer and help. And I feel super supported by my community. And I know that they have my back. So ask for help, take rest as much as you can. That would be my last little bit of advice. Some more photos from our night market on the right and the poetry reading on the left. Thanks, y'all.
Sasha, thank you so much. Your talk kind of kept reminding me of the famous quote by Gandhi, which is, be the change you wish to see in the world. And I feel like so much of your success has stemmed from your ability and passion to notice something that's missing and then take action to fill that gap. So if we want to diversify our events to expand into new communities, we need to be uncompromisingly open-minded so that we can learn and understand the needs that our businesses can serve. So thank you so much again. Okay, it's time for our final speaker, Precious Green. Precious began her career as an attorney in Atlanta, and after moving to the Bay Area, she worked at Impact Hub Oakland and with the African American Art and Culture Complex. Today, she is the director of programming at Manny's, a community-focused meeting and learning place in San Francisco. At Manny's, Precious leads the ideas for new civic and political programming, listening to the needs of the community to partner with the right people that support their mission. I'm so excited to hear from her today, so please join me in welcoming Precious Green.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. My name is Precious Green, and I'm the Director of Programming here at Manny's. In fact, I'm on our stage right now because we are a physical space. But today I'm going to be talking to you about expanding beyond your physical space, which we had to do. So you're probably wondering, what is Manny's? Well, we are a physical space where the community comes together to get engaged in civic and political life. Think of it as a town hall from back in the day, but for the 21st century and in the heart of San Francisco. Every day we have events featuring elected officials, thought leaders, activists, and the public coming together to create change. Manny is this guy. This picture is one of my favorites because it really encapsulates our spirit. He is fabulous. Our restrooms are fabulous. We are fabulous, but we're serious and we get a lot of work done because it's important that people are engaged, but in a way that's approachable. This is my team, and every week we are working together to create events. So you can come in pretty much any day, Tuesday through Sunday. Grab a cup of coffee or a snack in our cafe, check out the latest books in our bookshop, and stay for a conversation with a senator or congresswoman or mayor. It happens here quite a bit. These are just some of the events that we've hosted. You see Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi. That middle image is Julian Castro. He was one of 20 candidates for the Democratic nomination for the presidential race in 2020 who had an event here at Manny's, either in person like this one or virtual, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And of course, I'm in California. That's my governor, Gavin Newsom. He's a very tall guy. So what is the key to all of this? I like to think of it as currency, your mission. Once you know what your mission is, and that may take some time to develop and get really clear on, make sure you take it everywhere you go. That's your currency. It's better than the dollars in your pocket. And I'm going to be talking about that more. The currency really comes into play as you look to expand beyond your physical space successfully. In order to do that, though, you have to also be agile, creative, and open. And all the lights. I'm in a physical space where we conserve energy. So sorry about that, guys. We're going to keep going. So being agile, always pivot, always be ready. Being creative, consider hybrid programming and variations. Being open, look to partners and collaborators to expand your reach. What do we mean, or what do I mean when I say agility? Pretty much always be moving. So your mission again is your currency. That's what's going to ground you and be your North Star with your programming. So yeah, stay grounded, but always be receptive to new perspectives and opportunities. And you have to be ready to pivot from what you want to do so you can respond to what you need to do. That is going to pay off in the long run. For example, here, this is a shot from our debate watch party. And you'll notice it's outside at Fort Mason. That's the Pacific Ocean out there behind it. Obviously, we were dealing with COVID, but this was a critical event. And what we did, since our physical space wasn't an option, we connected with Fort Mason, which is one of these amazing spaces here in San Francisco. And they allowed us to show the debate on their Jumbotron. So people could come, they were in their cars, they were secure and safe. We initially were going to do everything on our own and realized that that was just going to be way too much. Porta potties are very complicated. So by working with Fort Mason, we were able to have an amazing event. We got national coverage for it, and we experienced some magic, and people really enjoyed the debate. Second thing to consider is hybrid programming. Now, as I mentioned earlier, our bread and butter is essentially our physical space. However, the pandemic has given us an opportunity to expand through the use of live streaming. So in this image, you'll see that's me on stage with some of the regional housing directors, and that's our iPad, which is bringing in people from around the country who are participating via Zoom. The great thing about this is you get to maintain your audience and expand because you're reaching people where they are. Key thing though, when you're looking at hybrid options, because there's so many to consider nowadays, take a gut check. Does this option align with your currency? Does it make sense for your event? Not every option or tech tool makes sense. One of the key things, and this definitely took some time for us to learn, it's not about the technology per se, it's about the staff and the people behind. So you want to make sure you have someone dedicated to monitoring the virtual experience, whether that be looking over and making sure the tech is okay, making sure the audience is engaged, alerting those of you who are in the space to the needs of the people who are in the virtual space. And of course, partnerships. This is a great way to increase your social capital and credibility with your audience, and also expand your audience, because just think about it. If you partner with the right organization, that's essentially their cosign that your work is worthwhile. And now suddenly their audience can become your audience. In order for this to really work, though, it definitely takes some work ahead of time. You want to get a good sense of your prospective collaborators, have several conversations, find out what their vibe is, what's their mission, where are you all aligned, where can you come together? This is so critical, it can make a huge difference. And one of the great things is when you get it right, you now have an opportunity to distribute the workload for an event and focus on your strengths, and they can focus on their strengths. This particular event was taking place at Shack 15, which is this fabulous social co-working space here in San Francisco in the Ferry Building. It's a membership organization, and they have members who are futurists, venture capitalists, people who are on the cutting edge. We wanted to have an event on the future of cities. What a perfect combination. We did exactly what I just told you to do, had those conversations, worked on our strengths, and had an amazing event for over 200 people talking about the future of transportation, which surprisingly is bikes. One thing I will say afterwards, you want to make sure that you are constantly debriefing throughout the process and after, because a partnership may start off sounding great, but as you're going along, if you're checking in, you can avert the partnership turning sour. And afterwards, of course, you want to debrief, because this may be something you want to do again. You may want to make it an annual event. You want to capture all the lessons and all the steps that you'll do for the future. So those are really the three key things. Remember, you got to be agile. You've got to be ready to pivot. This is another example of that. This is election night 2020. Again, we were still navigating this pandemic. So what did we do? We shut down the street, which is kind of cool when you think about it. And again, with our Jumbotron, we had an election night party. People were socially spaced out and taking care of themselves, but they could all come together to be a part of this signature event for Manny's. And these are just some other examples. We've also pivoted in having a news event break, and within 24 to 36 hours, we're able to throw up a Zoom event. For example, there after the Buffalo and Uvalde shootings, unfortunately, we needed to do that, but we were able to get Congresswoman Gabby Giffords on a Zoom for about 300 people talking about what they could do to combat gun violence. You'll also see there, we took our furniture outside to the park, being creative, trying something new. We at least have this great photo. And we continue working with our community with our disco trash pickups. So that's what we do here at Manny's. And I hope that these tips help you as you expand beyond your physical space. Thank you guys so much.
Displayed when the lights went out during the presentation, but I like that focus on agility because it involves listening to your audience and being timely with programming. This applies to way more than responding to breaking news. It's also about being proactive. Every event dates or when you choose to promote an event are key considerations that affect the success of any event. So really try to put yourself in your audience's shoes. What will they be thinking about on the day that you announce your event? When will they be most likely to purchase a ticket? Always be thoughtful and timely with your communications. All right, I think it's time to ask our speakers a few questions. So let's all start welcoming them to the stage, start dropping your questions in the chat, And as they're getting settled, what's up, y'all? I want to give a quick plug for our post-event survey. We really appreciate your feedback on today's session so that we can continue to improve and make these more useful to all event creators. Our link in the chat right now, so please take a few minutes after our Q&A today to share your thoughts. And special bonus, anyone that fills out the survey will be entered to win a $100 gift card to a vendor of their choice. So what's up, y'all? Thank you so much for being with us today.
Hi.
Thank you.
We all feeling good?
Good. Caffeinated.
That's what I like to hear. It's morning on the West Coast. I'm going to get right into it. I want to make sure that we are answering the questions from the group. So first question is directed to all of you, and this comes from Kellyanne. How do you juggle being a small business owner with your personal life to not feel overwhelmed and stressed? Are there any tips that you can provide to help balance those two things? Anybody would like to start?
I can jump in.
I'll start.
You go. You go.
Go ahead, Sasha. You.
I literally have to schedule like relaxation time. I have to schedule social time. Like I put it in my calendar. It's it's the only way that I get things done. And I found that it's really, really helpful for me to just like make sure that I'm creating that space and creating that time to rest or play or spend time with friends or whatever it is.
Just to add to that, don't stretch yourself thin. Definitely in the early days, I was trying to do everything. I was trying to, put on events, go to every event, and my personal life really took a back seat. And it wasn't really until years later that I've really tried to work on that, especially in the kind of post-COVID world of making sure that, my office work and the events are on one side, and that's not interfering with my personal life. It's one thing to want to go to an event of my own. That's great. But I was definitely in the pre-COVID days. I had to be in 40 places at once. So I'm trying to be much better about that.
What I'll add, and I had a lot of resistance about this, but it is so true. We use Google's Workspace Tools. So the Google Calendar is critical. And I found, kind of piggybacking on what Sasha said, dropping in those blocks of time that I'm like, no. I will be away. I will be, even if it is something like I have notes in my calendar that are like out with friends, but it's on the work calendar. You don't have to leave the details, but the entire team knows. So no one can act surprised when I'm like, no, I put that in there for your benefit. And now my brain is clear. It really goes a long way to carving out the space you need.
Totally get it. On the schedule, I kind of do the same thing on my personal calendar. I look at like every week and, what do I have going on after work every day? And, being really intentional about that so that the rest of the business is aware of that too. So I appreciate that insight. All right, I got a next question. This one comes from Who Are We Exhibit. And the question is, how do you start the conversation of partnering with an organization for a joint event? And Precious, let's start with you, if you don't mind. How do you start a conversation of partnering with an organization for a joint event?
That's an interesting question. I think it kind of depends on where you are with your knowledge of potential partners. I mean, if you are brand new and you're like, hey, I want to do an event around citrus. I don't know why that came up, but that's where we are. If that's all you have, then you've got some legwork ahead of time. You've got to do some research. Do you look at farmers? Do you look at restaurants? The whole nine. If you already have someone in mind, like we did with our Future of Cities event, really, we have a one-pager that we share with people, particularly if they're out of the Bay Area. But we shared that with them and we were like, hey, we have seen the work that you all are doing. It was arguably a cold call email. We've seen the work that you all are doing in this space, and this is what we're doing. And we thought, why don't we get together and have a conversation and see if maybe it makes sense for us to work together on this. So I think and someone asked in the chat earlier around my constant repetition of currency. I think having that clarity around what you can bring to the table and what you do with everything, you lean into that in that cold email or that call and let them see that there's an opportunity for them as well. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, totally. Sasha, I want to hear your answer to this as well, because I know you partner with a bunch of spaces.
Honestly, I kind of like what Precious said, like the cold call emails, I would say like having a template of like, an email that you can send out to people. And for me, it's just like, you just have to start the conversation. As simple as that sounds, it's like, come up with a template that's, hey, a brief introductory about who you are, why you feel like y'all align, and just, shoot your shot. Make yourself sound really good. Like when you're introducing yourselves, I see some people talking about sponsorship tips too, and like that's the same. Like, talk yourself up. Don't be afraid to be like, yes, I'm the shit. Here's what I have to offer. I know that I'm really good at this. And, just keep trying. And I feel like if you send like 10 emails to 10 venues, at least one of those people is going to come back and say yes, for sure.
All right. Gotta knock on 100 doors for one to
open.
open.
Yeah. Less than 100.
Corey, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd just say keep it personal, especially with the communication. I see so many emails come into my inbox that are so clearly automated. Hello, and then variable name and just a stock message, and I delete those immediately. But whether when I'm reaching out for a cold email, I agree with Sasha. Definitely having a template will save time, but adapt that template, make it clear that you actually wrote that email and you're a real person. I think a lot of people will appreciate that and appreciate that honesty and actually return your email, or at least read it.
Totally. Yeah, you got to tailor it so that it speaks to the organization that you're reaching out on. Now, there were two things that we talked about that I want to dig into. And the first one is still on this idea of partnerships. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is that, you're saying that like cold email outreach actually works, which is awesome to hear. If you reach out to 10, one will answer. But I want to acknowledge that like you all have a little bit of clout, like Manny's and Cuties LA, New York Adventure Club are relatively recognizable names. So I assume when you're reaching out, people are like, oh yeah, I know that organization. You have a little bit of that reputation already. And I'm curious if you have any other differing types of advice or recommendations for new creators who don't have that clout on how they should go about contacting potential partners if they don't have like that existing representation.
Obviously, you're right. And if you're brand new, that's going to require a bit more hustle. But we were all brand new at some point as well. And so, to Sasha's point, definitely think the template is a great idea. And actually, I have a version of it, but I told myself it wasn't a template. But the thing is, like, you got to sell yourself. Even if you are brand new, there's something in you that drew you to this idea, to creating this event. You have a passion that the person you're reaching out to doesn't necessarily have. Lean into that, because, in this particular conversation, you see yourself as the expert. And I think that passion, that expertise will be what grabs their attention. Obviously, you want to make sure you do personalize it, as Corey said, so they aren't just like, who's this, Jane Doe off the street. But people respond when you are authentically excited and passionate and committed to an idea. They really do.
Right. Cool.
Can I add one thing?
Please
also,
do.
like, if you, depending on where you live, if there are local spaces that you can physically walk into, like, you can still do that. We can still go into places and spaces and meet people and introduce ourselves. And I think that really, really goes a long way, like making face-to-face connections and, letting someone like get a feel for your energy. And so they can make a better decision on whether or not like they would like to work with you. that's definitely still a thing.
Totally. Love that reminder. All right, the second thing that I wanted to dig into, and this is a question coming from Ascending Tribe. Sasha, you mentioned it a little bit, but is this idea of sponsorship, and it kind of dovetails with the idea of partnership, but are there any tips that y'all have for other event creators in securing sponsorships?
Anybody?
Yeah, I mean, we have a sponsorship model here, but I think the particular person asking the question is talking specifically from a nonprofit perspective. And so I would defer to Corey or Sasha for that.
Unfortunately, I don't know if I can add too much. We don't typically work with sponsors for our events. We're working directly with organizations. So whether it's directly with a museum, directly with a tour guide, and we are a for-profit, so we are, we don't have a lot of the rules and regulations around charging for events. But there have been a host of events. I guess when it gets down to a larger event, partnering with other, forming those partnerships. Going back to partnerships, we had an event or two that did includes sponsors. I didn't know how it worked, but the partner I was working with knew all about it. And so I was leveraging their insight into it. And that's how I, started to learn more myself about it. Now it's not something I always do because we typically shy away from these very large events where you definitely need sponsors, but definitely, reach out to other partners who, engage in that, because they're going to know. Don't be afraid to ask it. Most people I speak with, if you ask them for advice, they're going to be thrilled you ask them, because usually no one will ask them for advice. So don't be shy to ask.
Be bold, don't be shy.
I feel like most of we've had like a couple monetary corporate sponsorships, but most of our sponsorships I feel like have been like product stuff. And so I think like specifically with product sponsorship, back to the Google spreadsheets, like I will start with a list. It starts with research. Literally, like, see what are the brands that I would like to collaborate? Why does this make sense? Come up with a list. Again, have your little template that like is a template, but also you're making it personal. And it's again, like, this is who I am. Talk them up, let them know, like, this is why I feel like we would make a good fit. If you would like to collaborate, give them information about the event. Really, you have to sell it and like make them know why it makes sense for them to collaborate with you. And so I think just like coming up with a list of potential sponsors, coming up with an email, having a deck, which I've created a deck in Canva for free, So there are resources out there. Again, just like make yourself look really good, and you have to be willing to like sell yourself. It's not a time that you can be shy. It's not a time that you can let your imposter syndrome take over. Like, you have to be brave to ask for money. You have to be brave to ask for things. And sometimes people will say no or they won't respond, but also people will say yes.
Totally. Yeah, it goes back to that idea that Precious was talking about, where you have to be confident, and you have to really exude that passion for other people to want to take part in your journey with you. So appreciate those answers. Tribe, I hope that answers your question. All right, next question is from Alyssa, and then we're going to get to Wonder, etc. And I think we have a couple more. So question from Alyssa is, how do you source new attendees for virtual events? And Corey, I would love to start with you, because you have done that amazing pivot into virtual events, and I believe you're still hosting some of those virtual events. So curious how you would answer that question of how do you source new attendees for virtual events?
Yeah, great question. So in the early days of COVID, those in-person events went to zero. So once I pivoted to virtual content, really I fell back on my existing audience. When I created those virtual events, I tried to think what would the existing audience actually appreciate. And so once we started to create those events and made sure that they were as good as possible, then that process of conducting event after event or I should say, a good event after good event attracted more people. Word of mouth for virtual events definitely spreads far and wide because someone from the UK can tune in just as someone can from California can. So you can definitely see some exponential growth. And with virtual, we work with a lot of presenters who have, who are excellent educators and present on a wide range of topics. So if that presenter comes back and says, hey, we have, I have a presentation for this other topic, we can then notify all of those previous attendees of that presenters who attended that presenter's webinar in the past, say, hey, this presenter has new content. And, and by doing that, you actually create these sub communities around presenters. And every time they have a new one, you have the loyal base signing on. And then that loyal base is telling their friends and family, hey, you have to check it out. And they can very easily because it's virtual.
Totally. I love that tip of making sure that you are partnering with the partners for your event to help promote that event as well, and leveraging their existing audiences. Really, like everybody that's participating in your event, this goes beyond just virtual events. If you have a chef that's providing catering, like make sure that you're leveraging their audience and getting them to promote the fact that they're going to be at this event. And that just, continues to spread the word about your events. Precious, I know that you do a bunch of virtual events as well. Curious your answer to this question.
Yeah, and this is not a paid plug or endorsement by any chance, but just facts. The tools that we use in Eventbrite, the hashtags, a lot of people try to dismiss those, but we have had so many people who've come in and they've said it's their first time here. And we're like, how'd you hear about us? And they literally will jump on Eventbrite and search for LGBTQIA, and our events will pop up. So you want to make sure that if you're using Eventbrite for your event listings, maximize what's available. Another thing that we do is, as we have more programming developing, particularly if it's not the exact same thing, but it's related. Like a great example, on Fridays, we tend to do more arts, cultural, fun stuff. And so this past Friday, we hosted an open mic. And what I did was go through our attendee reports for our previous arts events, like the last open mic, story time. We had a conversation with the director of the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus, and then just sent a quick, hey, I know you've enjoyed our programming thus far. We've got this going on. Wouldn't you like to check it out? Or I think the subject line was, it's your time to take the mic at Manny's. It was something. And we went from having, a handful of people registered for that event to having 40 people register. And then we had even more people clamoring to be on the stage. And so use the tools that you already have access to, and then also just go back into your well of people who already have experience with you and goodwill, and just reap the benefits from that.
Totally. Sasha, anything to add on virtual event promotion?
No, not really. Thank you.
Just wanted to make sure I wasn't leaving you out. All right. Our next question comes from Wonder, etc. I believe that's what it is. Are all your companies trademarked? And if so, what companies do you use to trademark your brand?
No.
I believe we are. I do not know who was used. That would be a Manny question, and he's not here.
Yeah, we don't have our the logo trademarked. Then there's the flip side of that. If you do get something trademarked, then you have to enforce it. So what are you going to do when other people start using it? And how are they using it? And, you're going to have to do that enforcement. So it's just something else to think about. But typically, I haven't seen any sort of blatant, rampant use. And unfortunately, with platforms like Facebook, it happens to us all the time. We have, especially in the early days of COVID, where we're, putting out these, Facebook event pages online, and then these, scammers were essentially, pretending to be New York Adventure Club and, putting the New York Adventure Club spelled wrong or different, different tags and recreating the event pages to a lesser degree, but driving people to fraudulent payment structures. So, if we had a trademark, that really wouldn't do anything anyway. So that's just a separate issue that would be with Facebook, who unfortunately won't help in most cases.
Gotcha. All right, that's all good. Wonder, etc. We'll have to follow up with you about trademarking. Maybe that'll be a topic for our next session. But I think we have time for one more question here. This comes from Tanya, and it's about using discount codes. Does anybody have experience offering discount codes, and how that has worked for y'all?
Sorry. Oh my gosh. Sorry, my cat. We have a Patreon, and folks that are our patrons, sometimes we offer them discounted ticket links. So I've actually had a little bit of a challenge using the actual codes, but having the specific link that folks can go to has been really amazing, and definitely works every time that we use it.
So we use the promo codes as well. So part of it, earlier this year, we had a campaign to expand. We have sponsors who have a subscription service donate as part of our financial model. So part of our effort to boost those numbers, we gave them the promo code. That worked really well, getting people excited and engaged. But we also use promo codes for particular events where we want, we want to really lower any barriers for particular communities to attend an event. So, if we have something that we think will appeal to people who are still in school or high schoolers or just fresh out of school, we might let people know that we do have a promo code for students. If we are having an event about a conversation, I'm thinking specifically around some of our programming around issues impacting the transgender community, then we will create a promo code so that members of that community can attend as well and not have costs be an impediment. And so that's been very helpful. And we always have a policy, no one turned away for lack of funds, that we are very clear about in all of our listings. So the codes definitely do help. And, we'll continue to use them.
Really quick, Precious, want to dig into that. Do you have promo codes that exist for all of your events? A student discount code is always applicable, or do you treat it as an event by event basis?
We do that on an event by event basis. And, there are some events that we have here where, whether it's a partnership or just the peculiarities, of the guests are such that we have some restrictions on what we can do or what have you. And then we of course have to respect that. But case by case or event by event.
And a quick follow-up question here from Ascending Tribe. What about sliding scale donation events? It sounds, Precious, like you do a little bit of that with a potentially a pay what you can. But Sasha, Corey, curious if y'all have ever hosted events with a sliding scale donation.
We don't typically do sliding scale donation. However, I think it's important to, even if you're asking for a donation, that they contribute something. There are certain events that we do that we cannot profit off of. But in the early days, we would just have it be free on Eventbrite. I think we all know what happens when you mark an event free. It might sell out at how many ever tickets, and then 3 people show up. So, and then some of the people who might show up might not be, really into what you're hosting. And you want, while it's always important to have a great tour guide, for example, it's also great to have a great audience. And so even asking for something, or in my case, it might just be, doing a reservation deposit of $5 like that is commitment, and that even a low amount like that will get people committed. So I would assume the same is for a sliding donation. If someone's willing to give $1, that they're willing, that they want to be there and they're going to be excited.
Yeah, great point.
Yes, definitely the free events. When people spend money, they value things more. It's just the reality of it. A lot of our events are sliding scale. I've kind of gone back and forth between like having just a donation ticket option that'll say like the ticket description says sliding scale 20 to 30. I have had people though that even seeing that they'll pay less. And so what I've started doing is like having a sliding scale. For example, we have an event coming up at the end of the month and it's sliding scale 22 to 44. So I just have 3 ticket options. There's a $22 one, a $33 one, and a $44 one. They're all the same offerings, but just so that people are doing what they need to do. I feel like those are the 2 ways, and I'm moving away from the donation just because sometimes people either seem confused or they don't read or whatever. And then I have to send them an email like, hello, can you? So yeah, I think having like different ticket price points for the sliding scale has been helpful for me.
That's an awesome tip. Well, y'all, I think that's our final question for today. I just want to thank you again for being with us here, for answering the questions, for engaging with folks who are joining us in the chat. Everybody, let's send our speakers off with some love. Thank you all so much. Appreciate you. Hopefully we'll chat very soon. And you have left me with some like really valuable takeaways about expanding an events business. Corey, you taught us the importance of developing processes and systems that will allow you to work efficiently, especially as you bring new people on to support your events. And Sasha, you explained that when you're wanting to diversify your events, you have to start by hiring the people that you want to reach. And everyone, don't forget to check out the Queer 26 directory at theq26.com. It's a great resource for finding diverse talent. And Precious, finally, you reminded us about the importance of reflection and constantly debriefing, especially with new partners, to understand what's working well and what isn't. These are just a few of the things that have stuck with me today, but would love to hear from all of you. If you can, hop in. What was the most important thing that you took away from today's session? Pop it in the chat so we can all learn together. But either way, we won't leave you hanging. There are so many important things discussed today. And we're going to do a full recap of the event for you. So keep an eye out on Eventbrite's blog for that recap of all of today's talks, as well as so many other event resources about expanding your business. So highly recommend you check out eventbrite.com/blog. All right, now really quick, before you go and X me out of your screen, I need to tell you about something that's new and excited that we're going to try for the first time ever. Because we're so inspired by how you all just naturally build connections during these events. We want to take it a step further and try to make even more connections with a new event creator speed networking concept. If you would like to meet with other creators in a one-on-one video call, sign up using the form that our team is putting in the chat right now. You can talk to each other about common challenges that you're facing. You can brainstorm solutions together, discuss best practices, really whatever is on your mind. Registration space is limited, so sign up today. We'll follow up via email with all of the details, but click that link in the chat. Hopefully Matt is sharing that very soon. I'd like to thank our speakers again and thank all of you for being with us today and engaging with us. If you haven't seen it already, our team is posting the post-event survey link. We really appreciate the feedback on today's session. We just want to make these as valuable as possible for all of you. And if you're sharing anything about your experience today, remember, we have the hashtag. We'll share the love on our channels as well, hashtag reconvene. And if you have any questions relating to the Eventbrite platform, you can check out our help center for all of your technical needs. And really the best way to stay in the loop about all of our community programs is to follow Eventbrite's organizer profile on the Eventbrite platform, as well as following us on social media at Eventbrite on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. We got a new TikTok up. Highly recommend you checking out. We want to keep this conversation going. And our next event is on December 1st. And it will focus a lot on what we talked about today, and there were a lot of questions around it, how to expand your reach through strategic partnerships. So excited for that one. Hopefully we'll see you there. Thank you all so much for joining us today.